We are live! Hurrah! For anybody that's watching, none of us actually knew whether this was pre-scheduled and therefore just going to go, or whether we had to press any buttons. So, welcome to this LinkedIn Live. We are going to be with you for the next half an hour-ish, give or take. Depends how many of you have questions that you need us to answer. If you have not met us before, we are Jackie and Pam from Catalyst Careers and Amanda from Thread HR, and we are going to be covering all things employer brand during restructures and redundancies. So Amanda, if I come to you and just get you to introduce yourself, let people know what Thread HR is and why this topic.
Nice one. Thanks so much, Jackie. Yes, my name is Amanda and I'm the proud owner and MD of Thread HR. And we specialise in generalising is probably the best way to describe our offering. So we love to work with businesses primarily who suddenly start to need HR for the first time. In our team, we're able to offer the full breadth and depth of what people might need in terms of HR. I myself have got a background as an operator, so personally really understand what it's like to run a business, what it's like to be a founder, run a P&L, manage teams, and we find that works really well with our clients.
Perfect. And Pam?
So I'm Pamela Langan and I am co-founder of Catalyst Careers, and Catalyst Careers is essentially a careers business. We offer a full suite of solutions from supporting hiring managers with recruiting talent through to career development, leadership and team development. We also support companies at the point they need to provide outplacement services after redundancies, restructures or settlement agreements.
And that was really what prompted this topic, wasn't it? Because we've done some outplacement projects recently, and we recognise that given the challenging circumstances in the economy, that this is maybe something that people are having to do for the first time. So if you're perhaps in a standalone role or you're a founder, this may be a situation that might be coming up for you. For some of you, you will have done lots of this previously, and perhaps it's a refresh rather than kind of starting from the first time. So Amanda, if I come to you first then, what even is employer brand? It's kind of, I feel like back in the day when I first started working in personnel, that's how old I am, like employer brand wasn't even a thing, and now it's a phrase that's used all the time. So what is it?
Yeah, I love this question. My first sort of step into HR was all around recruitment, and that really opened my eyes as the importance of the employer brand. And in a nutshell, it's how people think about our companies. What do they think about that company as an employer? And after Brexit, after COVID, after all the changes that we've seen to the labour market, it's more important than ever, because in a nutshell, there just aren't enough good people to go around. So companies need to be really loud and proud and considered in their approach to their employer brand to make sure they attract all those potential employees, but also to make sure they keep the really good ones they've got. And I think that's really important to think of as well. There's sort of the internal element. How do you tell everyone that works for you that you're a great employer, that you care about them? And then that external element for you going out to market. And I think another change as well is, as businesses are becoming more socially aware, how you are as an employer and how you're perceived is also important when people are looking at who they work with, who's in their supply chain as well. So there is that element to it, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting point, that aspect of, because I think very often the concept of employer brand is understood as the external bit as opposed to that internal piece. And I really like that point that you made about the kind of keeping the people that you really want to keep, and being really intentional about how you operate and how you are able to do that as an employer. So employer brand then, great for attraction, great for retention. So why should people be thinking about employer brand at the point of restructures or redundancies, where perhaps attraction and retention is less of a focus?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things on this one for me. I think you want to be remembering that how you are perceived locally is really important, and you might be a multi-site operator, so how you manage redundancies and reorganizations in one location, you know, people talk, there's obviously Glassdoor, Indeed, there's different ways that people can communicate how well that was organized, and that can affect your reputation in different places, which can unsettle existing employees, but again really put off those future employees and potentially even future customers that want to work with you. And I'm a bit of an optimist, I think a lot of my clients would say. So even when a business has made the difficult decision to go through redundancies or restructuring, you've got to think about the future. So it's really tough times now, but let's manage it really well. Let's be really considered and empathetic in how we approach them, so that when things start to come back in the future, you've got that great reputation, you've got great people that are keen to come back to you in the future as well.
Yeah, I really like that point. And I think with social media being as prevalent as it is, those messages spread. It was literally, I can't remember whether it was yesterday or this morning, but I saw a TikTok that was looking at a big employer closing a site in a specific location. And it was very much that element of people kind of having that voice and being able to talk about their experience. Yeah. And that was a social media channel that had been specifically set up. Yeah. Because those people felt let down, and I'm a complete stranger, you know, and obviously I watch a lot of careers content on social media, so that's probably why I saw it. But yeah, I think it's so important for people to recognize and remember how those messages spread so quick. So Pam, then coming to you, what are some of the basics then of maintaining an employer brand?
Okay, so I think for me, there's probably three things really. So the first thing would be do it well. I think that's super important. Also thinking about the human element of it and being compassionate, and also thinking about mitigating the risks and considering what opportunities there are out there as well. So I think with difficult business decisions that impact people, there's always going to be that tendency to go into robot mode and, you know, jump straight into the process. And it doesn't have to always work like that. Yes, there is a process to follow, but we need to think about the compassion, or we need to think about being more compassionate and how we can take people through those processes while really retaining that you know, that human side of things as well. So it is possible that you'll have people making decisions in the process that have been through the redundancy process themselves, and even if or have not been through that redundancy process, I should say. I mean, some people will have experience of going through that process, and some people will have never been through that before. So it's about considering both sides of that. And you need to really think about how you want your organisation represented. And I think the key thing really is training and empowering your managers to feel confident, because that will make a massive difference in how your entire team feel about the process. And that's obviously going to, you know, that'll drift down as well throughout the rest of the teams and the people affected. And I think also, I'm sorry, just one final thing, just allowing the time to do it well as well. I mean, a lot of the times when we're speaking to people, when we're speaking to companies and organizations about making redundancies and restructures, they usually speak to us when they're getting close to the time when they just need to, you know, hit go and start moving with it. And that can mean the process can be quite rushed. So as early as possible, if you can start thinking about the process, that's really going to benefit you and the organization and all of the people involved. And it will just make sure that, you know, it isn't a rush process, and that you can take the time to figure out exactly what you want. You can think about the people that are going to be remaining within the business and the people that you are going to let go. And it just really reduces the amount of risk to you as a business if you can give yourself as much time as possible to think through the process and what it looks like, and really think about that bigger picture.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That kind of human element is the bit that's so, I could see Amanda nodding as you were saying it.
And I think because people have got the fear as well, like there are obviously rules around doing this process well, and that robot revert back to the rules. I couldn't agree with Pamela more on that. And of course we've got to follow a process, but it can be done in such a human and considerate way. It's I couldn't agree more.
Oh, have we lost Amanda?
Oh, I think we had a slight delay there, didn't we? We were just like, it looked like we were all looking at each other, but actually I think it was the internet just saying, right, you will pause just for a second. So yeah, I mean, just while we are pausing out, that there are about 21 people watching at the moment, so we are going to open the floor to questions. So if you're watching and you're thinking that you've got a question, or if you just want to say hello, that's absolutely fine. And even if you can't stay until the end, just pop your question in and you can always come back and watch the replay later on. It will still be on our profiles later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's think then about kind of, like you say, Pam, that element of let's not make it a really rush thing. Let's kind of get some of those basics right and kind of have that human compassionate element. So what are some of the stages? So what should employers be thinking about? So Amanda, if I come to you first on that one.
Yeah, no, I think there's 3 stages. So if I kick off with preparation from an HR perspective, and then we'll head over to Pamela. And preparation, I think first things first is obviously you've got to be really certain that this is the best solution for your business right now. There might be other options. It might be that everyone's happy to cut their hours and salaries and different sorts of things. So do be sure this is the right process to start, and documenting it can really help. Doing a bit of a redundancy sort of reasoning document to help you be really sure that it's the right thing to do. In terms of language that's used, I think a common mix-up that gets people in a pickle is that it's roles that are made redundant, not people. So right from the word go, I'd make sure that everyone's really clear on that, because obviously it's incredibly emotive if you think it's you personally that's being made redundant, but actually the business is saying, no, we don't think this role is right within the business at this point, or with reorganizations, if the role needs to change to suit the business, it's the role, not the person. So as part of that preparation, I would just make sure that that's really clear from the off, particularly with anyone that's involved in actually executing the process. And then the other 2 things to really think about is think about your numbers. So if it's more than 20 employees that you might be making redundant, you've got to take at least 30 days for consultation. If it's more than 100, it's 45 days, and you need to let the government know. So again, go back to what Pamela was saying, you need to plan accordingly for those different numbers, as well as allowing time for all the other organisation that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew, as you said, a common mistake. I was like, is it going to be? Because it's such a small thing, but that language can have such an impact when people, in an emotive situation anyway, if you feel that is more personal, then it's natural that that's going to be harder. And I think, across the years, I've been in kind of the HR side during a restructure process. And that was one of the constant things, was that reminder and making sure that people did get kind of that language right. So Pam, in terms of kind of some of the outplacement side of it then, what needs to happen there in terms of preparation?
Yeah, so just going from what Amanda was saying there as well, a lot of people will, even if it's, clearly articulated that it is the role and not the person, people will take that personally. And what we found from supporting people from an outplacement perspective is that it can hit people really hard, and it will hit different people in different ways. And that's where it's really important to start thinking as early as possible about the support that you'd like to provide for those people, and make sure that the support that is available will cater to those different people and to those different reactions and to the different levels of support that those people might need. Because some people will, they might have, only just been in the job market in the last couple of years, so they'll be happy with the CV ready to hit the ground running. But then other people might have 10 plus years service and be absolutely petrified about going into the job market, into interviews and things like that. So if you can start thinking about the support that you'd like to provide for your teams now, then what that will do is that will allow you then, as soon as you start delivering those messages, to let those people know what support is available. And some of those people might want to take that support up straight away, and some people might want to let it settle in for a little bit longer before they start accessing that support, and that's absolutely fine. And then you can also start thinking about, okay, who have we got? What type of roles might they be looking for? What will work best for them? Will it be one-to-one support, or would it be group workshops, where people can bounce off each other and bounce ideas around? So thinking about those things and how the people that will be affected might feel, and the level of support is going to be the first thing when it comes to preparation. And then secondly, from a preparation perspective, thinking about the people that will remain. I always feel like those people are sometimes forgotten in the process because they're staying, so they're safe. So, it's fine for them because they'll just carry on as normal. But actually, in reality, they're probably going to have new responsibilities. They're going to probably be involved in different handovers. They'll also go through that emotional roller coaster that their colleagues are going through too. So thinking about the support that those people who remain will need as well, and thinking about it from the perspective of, will they need to upskill? Will team dynamics be affected? What do we need to do to support these people to ensure that they remain effective within the business, but also fully supported emotionally as well?
Yeah, and I think going back to what Amanda was saying earlier about that kind of your employer brand internally, that's where that piece really comes in, isn't it? It's kind of how well you do that preparation process, like you say, not just for the people that potentially where their roles are at risk, but also for the people who will be staying. Some people potentially will know from day one that their role is at risk, and others working alongside them will know that their role is not at risk, and managing that and making sure that people get the right support. And I think the other thing that I would add to that is it's really important to think about the support you give to the line managers or whoever is going to be doing consultation meetings and having conversations, because handling that degree of emotion that can come up can be really hard. Amanda, I can see you're nodding.
Really, really hard. I remember in a previous job as an area manager, we unfortunately had to close 2 shops, 2 coffee shops, and I was fairly new in my career as an area manager. And I just remember going home and sobbing my heart out, because these people so well, you're invested in them, and that's a great part of being a great manager, I think, to be connected to your teams. But then we've got to have those difficult conversations. It can really take it out of you emotionally. So yeah, in terms of thinking about what support you can give to line managers, who can they turn to, even though they're not being affected, and kind of for anyone else as well, actually, even though they're not being affected now, how can you stop them being nervous that actually there might be another round of redundancies in the future as well? Or, are they going to start looking for jobs because they're uncertain about the future? There's all these interconnected elements that are tied in, because hopefully we run an organisation where we really know our people and care about our people.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about kind of that execution phase then? So kind of once the preparation is done as much as it can be, what do people need to think about during the time that this, consultations or kind of the process is being followed?
Yeah, what do you do? I guess maybe this might be a good time to shout out the free download from Thread HR, which I think Pamela will share the details of at some point after this. But yeah, there's sort of a bit of a step-by-step guide on there in terms of a process. I think some things that I'd really call out, and then businesses are different size and complexities and so on, but I would communicate anything like this to almost anyone within that site that's being affected, because if you don't, what I really worry about is if you tell those that are directly affected, you've then potentially got a rumour mill situation and whispers going around as to what's happening. And I think as a business, you really want to control that message and that communication back to the employer branding, right? Any marketing business would talk to you about controlling the narrative. So I think that bit's really, really important. Depending on the situation, you've either got individual or collective consultations to do. And it might be that there's employee representatives, that there's trade union representatives. So really engaging with them and having really open dialogue. And the thing about redundancy process is it's not done until it's done. So being open the whole way through, which is quite a different dynamic to running a disciplinary or something, for that whole period of time, you're open to ideas and suggestions as to what else might be able to be done. So that's really, really important. And there is obviously a paper trail that needs to happen. And unfortunately, it might result in some people being dismissed. And it is a dismissal. When you're made redundant, you are dismissed. And the reason is redundancy. And that in itself is quite emotive as well, right? And on that, a really interesting bit of the redundancy process, and this is total HR geekery, under any other reason for dismissal, you've got a point of appeal, but under ACAS, you don't have a point of appeal as part of the process as ACAS, because if you appeal, you're then challenging the entire process and who else was made redundant. So you're sort of bumping someone if you appeal. So that's a really unusual bit around the redundancy process. So it might be that you just want to open dialogue after having given out the notices of dismissal. Want to talk through with a HR consultant, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember just on that point, one of the things that was well received when I was on the HR side of a restructure was that we had a questions document. So as different questions came up in, with the employee representatives, but also in individual consultations, we just continually updated and had that kind of that transparency of having those questions publicly available, within the business, and continually updated. And that meant that then people could, go to that as, okay, here is the actual. So like you say, kind of trying to avoid some of that rumor mill and have that degree of transparency.
Yeah,
so
like that.
Coming to you in terms of kind of the actual process then, and what do people need to think about from the outplacement perspective as that's happening?
So I think from the outplacement perspective, I mean, obviously at this point, you would want to make sure that you've got outplacement support in place and that you know exactly what you are going to be providing for those individuals and teams. And the key thing for me is letting those affected individuals know about the support that is on offer. And sometimes that, that can be buried within all of the information. So just making sure that in their consultation meetings, in communications, that is really clear. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to access the information or the process to get started. And I think it is key because there are so many emotions and we see so many people, go through so many emotions and, people will be backwards and forwards through the change curve. And, it is a really, really emotive time. So I think if you can just reiterate what support is on offer, have it really clear in every communication and make sure that it's also mentioned within those meetings, that will really help each person to process for themselves, when do I want to access the support? What might it look like for me? And all of the things that will make them emotional within that process, can potentially be alleviated by knowing that there's a plan for them, that they can access that support and start to move forward, even if it feels tough, because I think it always feels tough to a certain degree for every person. I don't really know anybody that's kind of just breezed through redundancy and says, oh, thank you for making me redundant. A lot of the time, it works out well for people, but generally that's when they've had a really good plan and really good level of offboarding. So I think it's super important to think about that as well.
And we see, don't we, such varied rates of uptake of outplacement support with the projects that we do. So within some businesses where there is that element, I think sometimes people feel like, oh, we've communicated it, we've told people it's available and it's up to them to go and do it. But when people are not in that headspace of feeling good, actually doing something for themselves and kind of taking on that support doesn't necessarily come naturally. So I think you're absolutely right. It's really important to kind of reiterate, make it as easy as possible for people to access it, but also kind of share the reason for people to take that action as well, and not just assume that they will just automatically kind of do it from having mentioned it once. So Amanda, how about that kind of offboarding stage then? So is the kind of, like you said, redundancy isn't done until it's done. So, you know, once it is done, what do people need to think about from an employer brand perspective there?
Yeah, we touched on some of the bits already, but it's what does the new world, what does the next chapter of this organisation look like? And something that should have really been thought about in the preparation bit as well is, what does life look like in that new chapter? Like Pamela said, where does the workload distribute? How do we make sure that we can still get the job done that we need to get done? How do we operate in this new world? So there's a very like practical bit around almost mapping different processes, who does what now, who's responsible for what, who's taking over this system and that system. So there's that side. And then I think the emotional and the people side, there needs to be that checking in. Survivor guilt is a very, very real thing. Like I said, in a lot of businesses, people are connected. The person that you sat next to for the last year might have lost their job, and you've still got yours, and you can sometimes feel, you know, very lucky and guilty about the fact that you're still working where you are. So making sure that line managers, an HR consultant, a HR team are doing regular and empathetic check-ins to make sure that the reality is what we think the reality is from the workload perspective, but also from how someone is actually feeling in themselves about things. And I think if that's done well, you're helping to future-proof the business as well, because you're demonstrating how much you care as an employer, and you're less likely to have people getting a bit nervous and starting to look elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pam, anything to kind of build on that in terms of from the outplacement side?
Yeah, I think, I mean, because we don't just look at the outplacement side, we do look at, you know, the team development side as well. When, you know, Amanda's absolutely right, you know, those people that have stayed, you know, they might start getting a little bit nervous, and they might start thinking about, you know, well, is my job safe, and starting to look elsewhere. And I know when we've done the workshops for the people who remain within the business, you know, those are things that do come up. And it is, you know, it's a really good time to think about, you know, what life looks like for them as you are offboarding the people who will no longer be within the business. And I think the key thing is thinking about what those changes look like for them, and supporting them through that as well. And just generally thinking about, you know, what that offboarding process looks like, because also what companies sometimes overlook is, as soon as you announce that people are affected from a redundancy perspective, the focus goes on to individuals and, you know, what about their job search and moving out of the business, and there's less focus on handovers and what they need to actually do for the business. Whereas if you've got that outplacement support in place from the offset, and people know that that's there, then it just allows them to flow through that process a little bit easier, still contribute to the business, but also focus on themselves. So it almost, like, it, to a certain degree, removes that panic mode for them, because they know they're not on their own. And I think that's super important. And then if you can put the support in place for the people that stay as well, and show them that you are actually then, you know, that you're investing in them, in their future development, and, you know, that you see them as a part of the business going forward, that also really helps as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to start to think as well about, so the risks that come with, or that there are risks that are associated to your employer brand with restructures and redundancies, but actually there can also be opportunities, and I think you're kind of starting to touch on some of those. So Amanda, what are some of the opportunities that might come that people may not have thought of?
Yeah, I mean, if a restructuring's done really well, there's very thoughtfully and considered and data driven, which is really, really important. There is a good opportunity for the business to actually make itself more efficient. And actually, the employees that are left after the restructure, the reorganization, might actually be happier, you know, if their roles are clearer, if they know exactly what they're doing, if reporting lines are clearer, lines of accountability are clearer. There are certainly opportunities for that to happen, which is great. And I think if it's done, you know, everyone recognizes it's a difficult situation, but I do believe that if it's done well, it can be actually a real positive for the organization and its reputation, which again, like we talked about, will hopefully help with the future in so many ways, current and future employees, but also with stakeholders in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finally then, before we conclude, and again, if anybody has any questions, then please do pop them into the comments. We're more than happy to answer those as well. But just in terms of some quick fire do's and don'ts, what would be your kind of top tips if people are facing this, if they're going into this situation, what should they take from this live as a kind of, right, okay, this is how to do it in the best possible way?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
You can go first.
Don't predetermine the outcome. You will get in a massive legal pickle if you predetermine the outcome. Equally, do not use it because Bob's a pain and you've been meaning to get rid of him for ages and you can't be bothered to performance management, so let's do it this way. That just won't work. It will massively affect your employer brand and undermine any trust that you've got in the business. So yeah, please do not predetermine the outcome. This has to be a really open-minded, I'm going to say a tricky word, a consultative process where we're open to hearing, you know, ideas and suggestions from, sometimes, let's face it, the people that really know the business the best. So that's a big top tip from me to get us started. I feel like I should knock the ball over to Pamela for the next one.
Yeah, I think from you know, when we're thinking about working with people from an outplacement perspective, the first thing is just really looking at, you know, who is affected, and you know, things like length of service is going to determine, you know, the level of support that they might need, and just really assessing those people and just getting a feel for what you think they might need, and then speaking to an outplacement provider like ourselves who can advise you on, you know, the service that we can provide or they can provide for those people, because sometimes that cookie cutter approach where it's like that one size fits all training isn't going to work for your people. And if you're going to do it properly, the best way is to really assess the people that are affected and looking at what options are available to them. And you know, there's a whole range of different ways that we can do that to suit like many different budgets. So it is just a case of looking at who's affected and almost kind of starting that conversation off and saying, how could you, or how would you help these people? What would you recommend?
Yeah. And I think that kind of considered approach, like you said, Amanda, is so important, and kind of not rushing and taking the time to think through what is going to be needed, what resource. And I think very often there's that kind of underestimation of the impact on the business and the impact on, like we've said earlier, the people who are going to kind of be involved, whether that be line managers, people, you know, doing those consultation meetings, internal HR teams. You know, it's a lot to handle. It is, you know, even for a relatively small restructure, there is an awful lot of thinking and consideration and planning that does need to go into it. So any kind of final aspects then, any more do's or don'ts, or any kind of final points that you want to make sure that people kind of take from this? Come to you first, Amanda.
Yeah, so I think the biggie that I think everyone will have got across is that it's roles, not people, that are made redundant. But in terms of a top tip in the process is thinking about that selection criteria. So a word that we haven't actually used yet on this call is pools. So you will find that you probably have pools of people whose roles might be at risk of redundancy. And the selection criteria is how you assess those people to decide which role is most appropriate to make redundant. And when thinking about that selection criteria, you want to go for things that can be objectively assessed as much as possible. And there's a couple of bits of caution around your selection criteria, because obviously you don't want to be discriminating anyone based on age. But you see people in the office, and actually that might discriminate against women that might work more flexibly because they do the bulk of the childcare, for example. So choosing that selection criteria well and objectively is going to be really, really important to that process for you.
Yeah, it's that kind of the risk, isn't it, of making sure that you get those right criteria, so that it's not just the obvious direct discrimination, but actually a lot of the risk there is inadvertently using criteria that would potentially be indirect discrimination as well. Pam, how about for you?
I think the final thing for me is just to really start the conversations as early as possible with the outplacement providers, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And if you've not been through a redundancy process recently, if you've not used outplacement providers before, then you might not know what is on offer and how that support can piece together and support your people. So I would say the biggest tip for me is to start those conversations as early as possible and just find out, what is going to be right, or initially get some options and some ideas, so that when you are assessing the people that are affected, you can say, well, that would work for them, or that would work for, that other group of people. So just thinking about what it looks like overall, and how you can make that, or how you can tailor that to the people that are affected, I think is key.
Yeah, and I think any external supplier that supports in these types of circumstances will be very familiar with the need for confidentiality and with the need sometimes for non-disclosure agreements. So I think sometimes that holds people back from seeking that early advice, and actually you can handle that in an appropriate way and still get some of that kind of early advice and early guidance. So just to kind of bring us to a close then, Amanda, if people are kind of facing this situation, what are the different ways that Thread HR can help? And just remind us again so Pam shared the link to the free resources, so just let people know what's available from you on that link.
Yeah, no worries. So the free resource we're offering today is sort of a process, step-by-step guide as to what it looks like to go through a redundancy process. And if you head over to the Thread HR website, which is www.threadhr.co.uk, you'll see that we offer what I call situational support packages, and redundancy is absolutely one of them. So if you click through there, you'll see that we offer bronze, silver, gold and platinum offerings, for again flexing on budget and experience that people have got of the situation. And those offerings range from supplying documents to help you go through it, to Thread HR actually managing the bulk of it for you and taking all that worry away from you. And I guess kind of linked in with that, if you are a small business, it might be that your HR person, their role might be at risk of redundancy. So actually getting an external and independent support can really, really help make sure that you've got a true process as well. And it is a difficult time, but, I believe we offer absolutely a compassionate service at Thread HR, and we'd be delighted to support you through a difficult time.
Perfect. Thank you. And Pam, Catalyst, how can Catalyst help?
So from a Catalyst career perspective, we can obviously help with the outplacement side of things, and we can create a package that works for you. And we offer one-to-one support, we offer group workshops, we cover everything from writing CVs through to job search strategy and interview prep, just to make sure that your people are fully prepared and ready to go into the job market and feel really confident in doing so. We also do some workshops around managing change and understanding the change and supporting people through that difficult time as well. And also for the remaining people on the other side of the outplacement support that we provide, we do also offer team development workshops as well. So what I'll do is I'll drop the link to the website in the comments, and then if you do want to get in touch and book a call, you can go over to the website and fill in the contact form, and we will be able to give you a call. And you can also access full list of our services from the resources link as well, where you can also access Thread HR resources as well. So I'll put all of those links in the comments, so if you are watching on replay, you'll be able to find the links in the comments, and if you can't, just drop any of us a message and we will be happy to share those with you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, for people that are watching, you know, potentially you may not be in a situation where you can ask the question, you know, in the comments thread. So please do feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, drop us a message. We are more than happy to kind of follow that up and to do that privately if that's going to be of benefit. Thank you so much to those that have joined us. I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed having the opportunity for this conversation. And I know we'd said before we started that potentially there might be a number of these lives on different topics that we might be considering. So we'll figure out which one is up next, and we'll put the event link live, and hope to see you again next time. Thanks for joining us.